Welcome to our afternoon session. For this afternoon, it is my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker, our second keynote speaker for the day, Jessica Cockburn. Jessica Cockburn is a senior lecturer in the Department of Environmental Science at Rhodes University, which is in Makhanda, where you are. And she grew up on a farm in a family passionate about conservation and social justice. These early experiences shaped her interest in understanding landscapes in an integrated way. Jessica completed her PhD in 2018. The title of her thesis was Stewardship and Collaboration in Multifunctional Landscapes, a Transdisciplinary Inquiry. Before that, Jessica worked as a practitioner, researcher in a diversity of applied environmental research and practice settings. Through her work on landscapes, linkages, and learning, she has come to appreciate the value of a critical, realistic philosophy in underpinning and deepening inter- and transdisciplinary social-ecological research. She's also curious about how people work together to address complex sustainability challenges in a variety of contexts, whether the contexts are involving diverse stakeholders in rural landscapes, whether it's researchers working in partnership with policymakers, or it's researchers working together across discipline boundaries. Jessica is interested in human-nature interactions as they play out in stewardship and sustainable livelihoods. She draws on learning theories, realistic evaluation approaches, and transdisciplinarity to support her engaged research and teaching on multi-stakeholder collaboration for sustainability. Today, Jessica is going to present on social learning through university community partnerships, a case study of land and water management. Welcome to you, Jessica. It's your time. Dr. Jessica Cockburn. Welcome.
Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. It's an absolute honor to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation, Bara and the team. This is my first ever keynote. Thank you, Dara, for believing in me. The work that the Rhodes University Community Engagement Office does has really inspired and encouraged me, but also challenges me in important ways. And so I'm really humbled to be here to share some of my work. There's so much more to learn and do, and what I'll be presenting feels like just a little snippet. It also feels a little bit skewed that I'm here on my own. The kind of work I'm presenting is deeply relational, collective work. And so I'm standing here with many others beside me, behind me, in front of me. It's not just me. So yeah, I'll be sharing some work from two sort of intertwined case studies on land and water management. And I wanted to just start off by showing this map to talk about, but before I do that, I need to put my timer on, otherwise we're going to get there. Sorry. Thank you. So why does water and land matter? We were reminded this morning, those of us who are not used to living in Makhanda, why water matters, because we want to have showers before we come to conferences. But other than that, water matters. Sorry, the map was not showing, maybe not. Because, yeah, we know why water matters, but why it matters specifically in relation to land is that the land is the place that captures the water for us. And so water and land management are integrated. And one way in which this is being researched and conceptualized and advocated for in South Africa is through the strategic water source areas. So this is a map that shows the blue areas are surface water capture and the green areas are groundwater. They show the strategic water source areas which cover only 10% of the country or of the region, but these strategic water source areas provide 50% of the total annual runoff of our water. So it's a motivation to really protect, manage, and carefully work with particular areas of land that produce, as it were, most of our water. And this is the motivation for a landscape approach to land and water management which I'll be going into more detail in terms of the case study. So, as Bertha said in the introduction, I work around this idea of landscape and learning and aspire to embed my research and teaching in this conceptualization of natural resource management. And when we look at landscapes, it becomes immediately apparent that an integrated approach is needed. Historically and conventionally, land and water are managed by different sectors and disciplines and knowledge holders, but landscapes, when we sit in them, work in them, reflect on them, and meet the people who live in them, show us that an integrated approach is necessary. Before I go too much further, I want to also just speak a little bit about where I come from in terms of this research and teaching, and to acknowledge the importance of reflexivity. We've heard a bit about that already. It's, to me, a really important idea in terms of acknowledging one's own perspective and positionality. So I'm an academic, now a mama. I've got a 1-year-old, changes the whole story. Working in the discipline of environmental science, also often kind of assisted discipline with sustainability science, drawing on social-ecological systems perspectives, committed to ethics of care and engaged research and teaching, and working actively to acknowledge and work with the challenges of Makhanda, the Eastern Cape, South Africa, and the rapidly changing world in which we live in. And those are themes which I think have already kind of come out this morning, and so I feel very much at home in terms of my approach in this community of practitioners and scholars. And I see myself as embedded in this kind of multi-level world, within the discipline, within the university, within the higher education system, and within, as I've said, this rapidly changing context, which calls us to do research and teaching in radically different ways. So I'm going to share my experiences of working in, as I've said, these two case studies, which in my work at least I'm trying to kind of bring together at the nexus of research and teaching, and to try and share with you how it is that these university community partnerships are helping to enliven and enrich the research teaching nexus for me. And I've intentionally avoided the idea of research teaching and community engagement as three different things that come together. To me, research and teaching come together within community engagement. Community engagement is not a third add-on. It's a way in which one can integrate and strengthen the research and teaching practice that one has. And hopefully some of what I'll share will make that a bit more evident. So I'm going to introduce the TISA project first. So the TISA project is a project that was initiated in around 2014. It's a sustainable land management project located in the far northeastern corner of the Eastern Cape, in the area historically known as the Transkei. It's an area sort of characterized by very rugged landscapes, landscapes that are prone to high levels of erosion. And there was a proposal to build a large dam in there under the auspices of the Mzimvubu Water Project. The ribbon was cut by then President Jacob Zuma. We still haven't seen any sign of the dam. Nonetheless, the dam prompted our Department of Environmental Affairs and Fishery to think carefully about what it would take to manage the landscape around the dam in a sustainable way to maintain the dam as a functional water reservoir. One of the big issues with dams and highly eroded landscapes is that they fill up with soil and become, I was warned about this. Thank you. They become filled up with soil and less able to store the amount of water they were designed to store. So the department put in place funding to support a research-driven project called the TISA project to address sustainable land management and try to reduce soil erosion to increase the kind of lifespan of this dam, post-dam. As I say, the dam still hasn't materialized. There's been all kinds of talks about where the money is coming from or not coming from for the dam. But the people who live on that landscape, their livelihoods continue, dam or no dam. And so what we saw in this project was an interesting and important shift in response to the realities of the ground, which was to actually focus more on local livelihoods and not so much on avoiding erosion of the dam. And so this has been a multi-year project with a diversity of stakeholders, researchers, practitioners, community members, leaders from the community, all working together towards more sustainable land management, but with now a particular focus on livelihoods, local people who derive livelihoods from that landscape through, for example, cattle farming, home vegetable growing, etc., but also acknowledging that those are not the only sources of income and livelihoods, and taking this kind of interconnected view of socioeconomic development. So it's hard to put all of that big project and its kind of complexities and ambitiousness in a 2 or 3 minute introduction, but I just wanted to set the scene for that. And what we did as researchers was sort of a two-pronged role that we played in the project. One was to facilitate and coordinate, and the second was to do knowledge co-production work. So we had a lot of postgrad students doing research in the landscape to guide the work around sustainable land management, and researchers who partner with communities in terms of co-producing knowledge. That sometimes works well, sometimes doesn't. It's also challenging to kind of put the relationships in place that are needed to make that work. But those are the kinds of things that we're doing in the project. The second project that I've been working in, and I'll talk, sorry, before I carry on, I'll talk a little bit more about what that meant in terms of engaged research just now. That was just a little bit of background on this project. The second project is a project known as River Rescue, and River Rescue is a small NPO here in Makhanda, started in 2020 by a local champion here in Holloman. She was inspired by a video she saw on YouTube. We don't read books, we watch YouTube, of Ashraf Shah, who's a volunteer activist in India who cleaned up Mumbai Beach. And she thought, well, if he can clean up Mumbai Beach, I can clean up the rivers in Makhanda. So she started showing up on Saturday mornings with big black bags and started pulling off the vast amounts of rubbish in the rivers in Makhanda. And out of that has grown this network of, not a network, but a network of volunteers around Helen and her kind of early followers who wake up every second Saturday or so and go and clean up the rivers. So I've developed a partnership with them around service learning and research to look at ways in which we as a university can support what they're doing, and how they can help us to produce the next generation of students in a way in which I'll obviously describe this morning, who engage with the real challenges of our time, engage with uncertainties, engage with the future, and the future that we don't just know about. So that's been a little bit of the story of River Rescue. And the slide back, which is really cool. One of the things that's been really important in River Rescue is drawing inspiration from children. And it's the children who actually show up to volunteer, actually, more than the parents and adults. And it's also the children for whom this work is being done. And I just wanted to read you the vision of the River Rescue project, which goes as follows. Our vision is to restore the local rivers to what they once were. Places where people collected clean water for washing, cooking, and drinking. Children played in the water, catching fish and crabs. Older people sat on the banks and found peace and restoration, listening to the gentle sound of the river. So it's about looking at where the rivers come from and where the river could be going in terms of the citizens of Makhanda and how they might benefit better from the river. So that's the River Rescue story. And I'm going back a bit forward. No, I'm still in the right place. So I want to just highlight a little bit from a more conceptual perspective what the CESA project has enabled us to do in terms of engaged research. So the focus here is on engaged research, whereas in the River Rescue project it's more around engaged teaching and service learning. So the engaged research activities that we've been doing in the CESA project are many and varied, but these are just some of them. So we've, as I said, we've had postgrad student research happening in the catchment. We've run a short course which has included participants from the catchment and also from elsewhere around social learning facilitation and natural resource management. We've developed an innovative approach to monitoring and evaluation of sustainable land management, which we call PMO, participatory monitoring, evaluation, reflection, and learning. And as I said, we've tried to enable knowledge co-production processes, so some more and less successful than others. And we've learned lots of lessons, and I'll come a little bit to the lessons later. Then in the River Rescue case, the teaching and learning focus has been around a service learning approach that we've developed in our honours, environmental science honours program. We've also had honours students doing their research theses in partnership with River Rescue. I mentioned some of the students there. And encouraging engaged citizenship amongst our students and staff in the department by participating in the cleanups and activities of River Rescue. And an important aspect of this for me has been reflective social practice. Or at the bottom of the slide, I myself have participated in a training course around reflective social practice and embedded this in my experiences of RSE, and it's been a really rich learning environment for myself as a teacher and practitioner as well. So in sustainability science, one of the ways in which we're justifying engaged research, and in every discipline I think we have slightly different frameworks and ways of doing this, but for us we can draw on this idea of transdisciplinarity to motivate for and conceptualize engaged research and teaching. And there are three ways in which I think that community university partnerships can help us to build transdisciplinarity. It's around collaboration, so the partnerships between university and community. It's about innovation, which is around a qualitatively different and new way of doing research and teaching. And it's around action, importantly, and I think this is the one which, slides are not due, sorry, this thing is really hard to do this on this. You guys know it's not easy. Yeah, so we have a commitment in transdisciplinary research to addressing societal problems by partnering with societal actors, by enabling social learning processes amongst researchers, students, communities, and other stakeholders. And these are quite lofty ideals when you're sitting in the conventional spaces of a university, and they take a bit of doing, as you all know, doing this kind of work. And they require transformation of our knowledge system. And here I just want to acknowledge some really exciting work that Jan Fazi and others have done, talking about what it actually takes to transform our knowledge system. And I think quite a lot of that came out this morning already. So what is transdisciplinarity? There are different ways of thinking about it. One way is to see it as a kind of gradient or continuum of integrated research approaches. This looks a little bit like the slide that one of the speakers this morning had from CPUT. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. But the mode 1, mode 2 research continuum is kind of similar to this actually. So disciplinary research through to multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary research can be seen to be along the continuum. And I'm not going to go through the details of this, but the one in which we're trying to situate this engaged research and teaching work that we're doing is transdisciplinary research. It can be considered the highest form of integrated research, involving not only multiple disciplines, but also multiple societal participants in a manner that combines interdisciplinarity with participatory approaches. And if we think of it in the metaphor of fruit, we can have disciplinary research where we can develop the perfect peach. Then we can go into a kind of more combined fruit bowl idea with multidisciplinary research. Then we can cut those fruit up and mingle them together and make a fruit salad that's starting to taste quite cool and yummy. Transdisciplinary research is more like a smoothie, but not just any smoothie, a smoothie where you forgot to put the lid on and it gets messy. So the realities of transdisciplinary research are that it's not easy, and it's not easy to structure, it's not easy to follow the principles and guidelines. It's messy, and it's all about learning by doing. And it's also important, I think, to acknowledge that we can't have transdisciplinary research without that peach. So disciplinary research and multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary research still have their place and their value. It's about how we integrate them into more collaborative learning processes and problem-solving processes. And then the next step, or not the next step, the next coming soon, is that I had a baby. So I have all these cool ideas about conceptualizing disciplinary, multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary research, and then there was Jonah, and he took all this and turned it into a fruit pizza. It's even more interesting. So I'm busy undergoing what seems to be some kind of challenging sort of identity change process as a mom in academia, and learning a whole new way of knowing and being and transcending and unlearning. And I felt it would be amiss not to mention Jonah, my 1-year-old, who is busy reshaping the way I think about the world and the way I do my work. And yeah, I just wanted to have a little nod to Jonah. And I wish she was here, but she's safely with Granny and we can concentrate on this. Yeah. So I want to just take a moment to comment on this idea of trans, this kind of prefix of transdisciplinarity. It's quite an important idea because it shows us that transdisciplinarity is kind of ambitious in its attempt to transcend at least 2 different boundaries or sets of boundaries. So transcendence means to be or go beyond the range or limits of a field of activity or conceptual sphere. And so the first set of limits that transdisciplinarity tries to transcend is the disciplinary boundaries, so the boundaries between the different disciplines within the university. And the call here is to be transdisciplinary, kind of in our own heads as researchers, but within the university. But then importantly, the second set of boundaries or limits that we try to transcend with transdisciplinarity is the range of academic activities and knowledge production in terms of transcending the science-society boundaries. So the call here is to engage society meaningfully, respectfully in our knowledge co-production processes. And these are aspirational, ambitious, and often very messy, as I've said, leave the lid off the smoothie maker, learning-intensive processes. And we're finding our way in new places and spaces, and the terrain is rather bumpy. I think it's really important to acknowledge that, because these frameworks and concepts in the literature can often kind of oversimplify what these processes are really like. So I'm coming now to reflect on some of the learning processes that I've been engaged with in this work. And I want to start off by just looking at what social learning actually means. So social learning has a huge body of theory sitting in environmental education as a kind of discipline, sub-discipline. And one of the ways in which it can be defined is that it is a collective action and reflection that occurs among different individuals and groups as they work to improve the management of human and environmental interrelation. And you can see again the echoes of this that came through in some of this morning's presentation. The idea that we're doing things together, collectively, relationally, and that it's the moment of taking time out to reflect together around what it is that we're doing that helps us to actually learn and make sense of that process. Another definition is from Aaron Balls, one of our kind of well-respected social learning theorists. He says that social learning is a particular kind of learning. It is learning that takes place when divergent interests, norms, values, and constructions of reality meet in an environment that is conducive to meaningful interaction. It can take place at multiple levels, so not only at the level of the individual, but also at the level of a group or organization, or at the level of networks of actors and stakeholders. So it's about making the most of diversity and divergence in terms of learning and change processes to work towards the future that we don't yet know exactly what it is and what it is that we want. And we need those social learning processes to figure that out together. And that's what these multi-stakeholder and collaborative initiatives and projects that I've been involved with have enabled us to do, is to bring that diversity of perspective together, as hard as it is, and it is hard, to try and make sense of where we're trying to go collectively. So now the last few minutes, I just want to share some of what we are learning in these partnerships that I've presented, so the River Rescue Project and the CETA Project. So starting off with the River Rescue Project, I'm starting off by sharing some quotes from our KEYNOTE reflection report. So as I said, reflection and reflexivity are really key ideas in terms of how we facilitate this kind of learning. And so one of the students wrote this. Let me have a sip of water before I read through the quote.
Changes now.
Oh, thank you. Oh my word. Oh no, I'm married. Yes, here we go. Thank you. So yeah, student reflections. When I came to River Rescue, my perspective was very much rigid. I assumed that I was the one who would be helping the local members with my academic knowledge. We've heard this already this morning. However, when I arrived at the field, I soon began to realize that as useful as my academic knowledge was or is, it is still incomplete. And because of this experience, I gradually became more aware of the importance of local knowledge and how the experiences of local members can help me in creating more holistic knowledge that is multifaceted and is made up of the different experiences of people. Another student reflected, one thing that kept me going back was that people noticed the difference we were making, and they felt bad that some people were still commuting after our hard work. Also, others joined River Rescue because they were influenced by seeing us clean the river. And then another quote that I'm sharing here is from a letter that Helen Holloman wrote. She's the founder and coordinator of River Rescue, about the benefits that they as an organization have experienced through our service learning partnership. And she talks about how the hands-on exposure of honor students to the realities of the local water courses and the lives of the people who live among them makes real the theory of systems thinking, and often compels reassessment of one's understanding and assumptions. Working side by side with members of the community, listening to their problems, seeing the daily reality of the difficulties they contend with, provides life lessons that no theory can provide. She goes on to say that involvement with the River Rescue Program has been profoundly beneficial in strengthening links between the university and community and in transforming the direction of the program. It has brought direct educational and practical benefits to both the community and the honours students, reciprocity, we've heard that theme as well, and has introduced new reflective ways of thinking about the links between people and their environment. So now I'm going to share a few lessons from the TITA project, that's the Sustainable Landscape Management Project. And this is based on, next slide, this diagram is based on a paper that we wrote sort of midway through the life of that project that talks about the bumpy terrain that we're navigating. I mentioned that just now. Because we're kind of encouraging, enabling, and facilitating a coming together of different knowledge systems, different worldviews, different epistemologies. And these come into tension with one another, and it's in these tensions where learning can take place, but only if carefully facilitated and people enter into those spaces with an open mind and a respectful approach. So we see, for example, that science and management are in tension with one another. The way in which scientists generate knowledge and the way in which practical managers generate knowledge is different and in tension. Or we see that, for example, natural science and social science are in tension with one another. We have natural scientists and social scientists in that project who have different framings and ways of making sense of the world and generating knowledge, and these are pulling in different directions. And there are others that build a disagree that I'll highlight. But these different knowledge systems come into tension and create a bumpy terrain for us to work on and make sense of the world and move forward and act on. But a rich terrain for learning as well. This is a little excerpt, and I'm not going to expect you to read it or for me to read it to you, but I just want to draw your attention to it. We developed some practice and policy briefs out of this project, trying to capture what we're learning out of this project. We're learning about working together. This is part of that messy space of transdisciplinarity where we're coming together in new configurations, as I showed in the previous slide, and actually learning how to work together. We're learning about learning together. How do we learn together? How do we produce knowledge together? We're learning about interconnections between people and landscapes, understanding how it is that people live in and with the landscape. We're learning about the landscapes themselves from a kind of ecological perspective, how they function, how to manage them, etc. So those are some of the kind of knowledge outcomes of this process. And I just want to draw your attention to these. These are available online. These are the TITA project practice and policy group series where we've unpacked a lot more of these lessons and learning. And then kind of taking a step back, I worked together with some other colleagues and we developed this framework to try to capture some of the challenges of doing transdisciplinary research. This came out of work of a few of us who were doing our PhDs through transdisciplinary frameworks. And we propose that doing transdisciplinary research is about navigating navigating the triple S, we called it, which is about the tension or the kind of ambitions of trying to address science, society, and self. So when we're doing transdisciplinary research, it's aspirational, as I said, it's ambitious, and these are the two things we're trying to keep kind of in relation to one another. How do we reach for and achieve societal impact and engagement? How do we maintain scientific rigor and excellence? And how do we look after ourselves in all of this without compromising the goals of societal impact, engagement, and self-care? Someone in a question from the chat earlier talked about how does community engagement, how we can deal with the additional kind of workload issues that come with integrating community engagement into research and teaching and work at the university. The self-care question is a biggie for me, especially now with this new Monwe role. We need to reflect carefully on how we can do these things strategically, but also meaningfully without compromising our own health and etc. So this has implications for also how we train and teach the next generation of engaged scholars, of transdisciplinary scholars. What are the kinds of competencies that we need, and how can these competencies be developed? Then another set of lessons that we've drawn out of a kind of more meta-analysis of these kind of transdisciplinary research projects is about the kinds of frameworks and ideas and principles that we can put in place to guide transdisciplinary research. So this was work done on a set of case studies looking at how to work not only towards sustainable but also socially just natural resource management. And the literature that we get from the global north in terms of transdisciplinarity has kind of focused very much on these first four so-called seeds, how to sow the seeds for transdisciplinary research. There's a lot of talk about building collaborative teams. There's talk about producing solution-oriented transferable knowledge. We talk about effective integration and implementation of that knowledge, and then about evaluating, mitigating conflict and enhancing participation. But what's often missing in terms of the literature kind of to date, which is we were trying to argue here, is what's on the left here, is the importance of ethics as a guide to behavior, and that came up this morning as well. And the importance of preparing and nourishing the ground for diverse values. So when we come together in these multi-stakeholder projects and engagements, we each come with our own backgrounds, our own values, our own orientations. And if we don't explicate those differences and work with them productively, they can actually hamper the progress of these projects and processes. So what we're learning, especially I think in the kind of global South context where we're working, is to be more explicit and clear around the importance of ethics and values in guiding these processes. So I'd like to just conclude with three sort of take-home messages where I think we need to go from here. And the first is to broaden and deepen capacity development for this kind of research and teaching. The second is to advocate for institutional change. There are lots of barriers that we face in our institutions to do this kind of work. And the third is, and I think that's what we're all here to do at the symposium, is to reflect critically on engaged research, teaching and learning. What is it that we're learning? Where are the gaps? Where are the challenges? And to keep ourselves accountable for the ambitious goals and aspirational frameworks that we're all working towards. So all of this is to say, I think this is a wonderful event for all of us to be here to do all these three important things. And then I also just wanted to share an exciting project that I'm part of a way forward for me to take some of these learnings forward is the Transfix project. It's an international partnership between universities in Canada, Germany, and South Africa to build capacity for transdisciplinary scholarship and practice in this global North-South partnership space. And it's been really exciting for me as a young scholar who's come through practicing and learning transdisciplinarity to be able to also contribute to building the next generation of transdisciplinary scholars. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for the brilliant presentation. Okay, it was clear, your methodology and everything. It's 6 to CE. You were stressing on the need to be involved to be engaged in our research, to be engaged in our teaching and our learning, and also the transdisciplinary approach to doing research. Those things are key to CE, and the integrated approach that is needed in managing our natural resources. So this is time for questions. If we have any questions that you want to ask Jessica, now is the time. That we are going to take 3 questions, and then she will respond to the 3, and then.
Thank you. Let's take the moment to do something that's just happening, to know that they're working. As you were speaking, you was part of Intertheatre, and this is part of a project that we worked on in October called Versus the Growth. I have to kind of give a comment before asking the question, so please bear with me. You spoke about community assumptions. We worked with a professional. I myself, not an academic student, but I am a student of universality. Dr. Manato had to come to the community, and we found the likes of us, those who were engaged with the community. We actually had a vision around where we'd like the rental community and the surrounding communities to go. So he had to change his approach. He thought he was the saving professor who's got all this knowledge, but no. This thing in the end was he was going to teach us the jargon. We were going to do it. So the process of growth, the making informed what would be the outcomes and what would be the narrative. So from there we went on to write a play that then spoke to the people who were actually in the same boat. So my question going forward is, how do we acknowledge this acknowledgement or recognition of higher learning in those who want to get into the academic spaces that are before us? I also like to touch on river rescue. When I first came to Makhanda, it was the first place I saw. So 30 rivers and 30 bridges and everything like that. So Mama Helen was one of the people I met. This is the Dailies. And I got involved with Mr. Brevin Chetty from ELRC and Mr. Malek Mponan, who then took me onto the UN No Planet B movement. So as it is, I have a video where I am supporting Mama Helen Parliament, and it is on her shoulders that we are riding as Project SEP in this here town. Now, my question around that would be, how do we highlight the importance of supporting river projects, even though we're involved in ocean projects, to say that ocean-bound plastics begin in rivers, ocean-bound plastics begin in streams. How do we put emphasis on actually stopping this ocean-bound trash in plastic at a river level? And at the moment, we're also looking at springs. Important. As we speak, this town is going through a problem of water mismanagement, for lack of a better word. But every time we go do research with them, we are finding that more springs are showing up everywhere. That's just nature's problem solving. Now, how do we make sure that those springs are protected, first and foremost, recognized? And first of all, and then the other aspect, which is to make sure that that water is drinkable and safe. And then for me, that is taking this transdisciplinary thing that we have done, because research was conducted with Bevan and again. We've been around to see these, but now we're saying, okay, so what's the point of just researching with springs if people can't engage in drink from springs? That's the ultimate thing. And then let me address education. Going forward, could it be that education could be what it is? The rekindling of a flame and not the filling of a vessel. The educators who come forward, just know that these vessels that you see around, they come profound with what they have. It's called IKS, Indigenous Knowledge Systems. We incorporate more of those indigenous knowledge systems into the curriculum that prevails. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just want to recognize the indigenous scholar sharing your wisdom, the universality of our co-creation. I first want to start, Jessica, by just saluting the way you started and positioned yourself excellently. And so what we try to encourage colleagues that write in this particular way, that you first arrive as a human being. And it's good to know who you are, so that the writing makes sense as we move along. So I salute that positionality. The second one is the notion of writing in metaphoric ways, because academia is very, I would say, defensive, for want of a better word. How we express knowledge. And I like the metaphor of the fruit and the analogy. And when I work with some our engineers, they get crazy when they see these type of metaphors. How did you navigate that, the transversality and writing between the first and third person when presenting such important information? The third one is on the measuring of impact. And thank you that you're starting to introduce new ways of understanding how you measure impact. For the speak of PMO, participatory monitoring and evaluation, reporting and learning. And I'm very interested to understand if you have a tool and if you could share that tool so that we start introducing more tools and move away from this quantitative assessment and measures more significant impact rather than scale, which is the tendencies of the university. And then I think on the ethics, I think that's the next area, the next area of engagement institution which you all have to engage. Because I think the composition of these committees need to form part of these conferences so that they could understand the science. Normally, as if we are not part of the sciences. So when we speak in our language, we speak as scientists, but we regard ourselves as social scientists, not natural scientists. And I think this is some of the discourses we need to encourage in our space. And then in alignment with the previous scholar, I want to say that, this notion, one critique of your presentation then, and I know as a critical action researcher, I think you value such critique, not criticism, critique. That's how we build our practices and our scholarship. Is where is the reflection of the community on the university? So we have the students, we have the participants, what does the community think about us in the way we've engaged? So that is one critique. And then I celebrate Jonah, and I think it's important, you make an important because it must have had some significance. So can you also then explain in your response what the arrival of Jonah, how did that shift your position in thinking about your work? You just touched on it, but I'd like to know as well. Thank you, Jim.
I think we are going to give Jessica some time to respond to the questions that have been asked so far.
I want to just start off by saying here's an opportunity to flip the what did Claire call it? Sorry, you shared a word for it. The walls between academia and outside, and between experts and non-experts. Those two gentlemen have contributed so beautifully to my keynote. Thank you very much. I don't want to answer or respond in a way as if I now know the answers to the comments and contributions you've made. So thank you so much. But I will respond. But I just want to acknowledge, thank you both for your very thoughtful and empathetic responses. Also responses that show me that the work that I'm doing is valued and heard. So for that. Yeah, it's the question about recognition of prior learning. Thank you for that. It's a tough one, and I know that at Rhodes University we're constantly looking at how we can open up access to the institution to people who've had different learning pathways out in the world. And I'm not someone who sits at that level of work, but I know that there's work going on, and that it is possible to make motivations for prior learning that is non-academic, as it were, but it is very difficult still. We still are held to standards that are kind of set elsewhere and that are difficult to move. And this, in a way, speaks to the issue I mentioned about institutional change. There are a lot of barriers within our institutions to recognizing different forms of knowledge and education and learning. So yeah, I can just say there's a lot of work to be done there, and thanks for reminding us about that. The second thing you talked about, well, there's so many things you spoke about, but I just wanted to respond to your comment about the protection of springs. As I was sitting here this morning, and I've been involved in that project tangentially as well, so I know exactly which project you're talking about. As I was sitting here this morning, I was reminded of how uncomfortable I feel when we talk about the Makhanda water crisis, yet I come up here and make a presentation about water and land management. And we as the university, sitting with supposedly knowledge on water and land management in this city in crisis, what the hell is going on? It's very uncomfortable. But I'm also, and I'm going to comment on Jonah's arrival, also conscious of the expectations that are put on us as academics to tick so many different boxes. So as much as I would like to come out with you and find a way to protect those springs so that the people of Makhanda have fresh, clean water to drink, I'm also having to teach students in 3 different courses. I'm also having to publish papers which no one reads. I'm sorry about that. Well, not very many people read. And I'm also having to supervise students, etc. So it feels challenging to hear that and to be reminded of that. And I just want to say it's difficult and makes you feel quite vulnerable and able in terms of one's inability sometimes to respond effectively. And when one has a brand new baby and isn't sleeping very well, it makes it even harder. So I'm not going to go through all your points because I suspect we're under a little bit of time constraints, but thank you so much for your comments and questions. Maybe 2 things that I'll respond to. The one is the writing, the metaphoric writing and the shift from first person and your experience with engineers. I'm really lucky to be sitting in a discipline like environmental science, which is a relatively new discipline. It's a discipline that emerged in response to societal problems and a lack of that kind of knowledge and responsiveness in the university. So even at Rhodes, it's one of our newer departments. And it's a department that has enabled a lot of innovation and kind of critical thinking about how we produce knowledge. And so within that discipline, one can find pockets, and when I say pockets, I'm talking, for example, about journals or conferences, where innovative and open kind of ways of doing writing and research are welcomed and encouraged. So I've been lucky to be able to navigate and find those enabling spaces. It's hard, you still get lots of journal rejections when you write in a certain way, and then you know that you don't go back to that journal. But yeah, I'm in a very enabling environment, as it were, in terms of my discipline. Yeah. The second thing I wanted to comment on was your thing about measuring impact and PMO, participatory monitoring, evaluation, reflection, and learning. That's been a very exciting and enabling space for us as well, because it's, as you said, it's helped us to confront the difficulties and challenges of quantitative impact assessment in a way where we're not throwing those out. We're acknowledging that they're necessary and important and they have a role to play, but they can actually be strengthened by bringing in a more participatory approach, an approach that values qualitative data, other forms of knowledge and data, and in a way that helps us to still be accountable to the funders in the way in which they expect us to, but to able to enrich that and tell the stories around that data in a more meaningful way. And there again, I'm grateful to have, in that particular project, have had a very enabling funder or supportive funder who allowed us to be innovative and creative in terms of outcomes and evaluation. So yes, there are different things I can share, and those links to the policy briefs will be the first place to go. And then lastly, Jonah, how has he changed things? Sure, I'm not sure yet. Things are still changing and it's kind of hazy and difficult to see. But I think, excuse me, I think one of the biggest things I'm learning from being a mom and being an academic is around humility and vulnerability. And as an academic, we are often pushed to celebrate our own individual successes and our own individual knowledge as experts. And that's why I said I don't want to answer your questions as if I'm the expert. And I've succeeded in a way to this point in my academic career by ticking all those boxes of academic kind of success as an individual and as someone who has enabled or been able to succeed in the system as it is. But being a mom has kind of made me really question whether I'd be able to continue doing that in that way, and how can I be comfortable with being a bit more incomplete, a little bit less prepared, a little bit more rough around the edges, a little bit sleepier, a little bit more temperamental, and not be as perfect and successful as I was before becoming a mom. And I think that hopefully makes me more human and more accessible to other people in terms of collaborations and engagements. So thank you very much.